Welcome back to Unveiling the Covenants. We are talking about the story of Joshua. Now, we finished the book of the Exodus, and so we are moving forward in the narrative here. At this point, Moses has died, and so after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' minister. Just to cut a long story short here, there were a tremendous amount of betrayals of the Israelites of God. They kept testing God. And eventually Moses himself betrays God in his pride and in his anger. And so the curse that was pronounced, if you will, is that Moses will not be allowed to enter the promised land. But his son Joshua, and it wasn't his physical son, his, in this case, spiritual son, his minister, would be allowed to enter the promised land. And so Joshua will take over from Moses as leader of the people of Israel. And so God now speaks to Joshua the way God spoke to Moses. Moses, my servant, is dead. Now, therefore, arise, go over this Jordan, you and all his people, into the land I am giving to them, to the sons of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you, as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea, and it goes on and on. The premise here is that the promise that was given to Moses as mediator continues in the life of Israel. A few things have happened. The generation that escaped Egypt has died, and the only remaining people are those who were born in the wilderness. And so these are people who were born into the covenant and who were raised in fidelity in the covenant. And so their hearts were not as hardened by the reality of slavery. One generation has been enough for them to forget the pains of slavery to a certain degree. Now, I want to make clear here, the reality of bondage and slavery and suffering of the people of Israel will continue generation through generation. They will talk about this in liturgical remembrance. But their hardness of heart is gone now, or at the very least, to some degree it's gone. And so this is what happens. God then tells Moses, tells Joshua, no man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you. Be strong and of good courage, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land, which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Turn not from it to the right hand or the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. And then it goes on to say, in the way that this will be done is that they have to obey the book of the law. And look at the promises here. These are all covenant promises, stipulations that are given to Joshua as the conditions of his leadership. This book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For you shall make your way prosperous, and then you shall have good success. Have I not commanded you, be strong and of good courage? Be not frightened, neither be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. This was God assuring Joshua. You will notice that in the entire beginning of the book of Joshua, Joshua will need that assurance. But I also want to point out here, this narrative is for all of us, that Joshua stands as the leader of all of the faithful children of the covenant, including us. And so God continues to send us mediators who will oversee his covenant people. This is one such example. And so what does Joshua do? Well, he commands the officers of the people, pass through the camp, command the people, prepare your provisions. And so whenever they engage in battle, they begin by means of spiritual warfare. In 3 days, you are to pass over this Jordan. That language of Passover is going to keep repeating itself, and the reason why is crucial. Them taking possession of the land, them embracing their freedom, is a continuation of the Passover that began, the Pesach that began in Egypt. And because of this, the Lord has given them the land which they are to possess. I want to make this very clear here. If we are to pretend that the scriptures are not real, then we can say that Israel does not have a claim to the land. But the truth of the matter is that promise of the physical land will be reiterated again and again and again from Abraham to his descendants. Because God means for the blessing of the physical land to be a part of the blessing of the people of Israel in their existence. So even their being diaspora, even their being scattered from the land, is still going to bring about an appeal to that blessing that the land truly is theirs, and they're able to come back to it. And so, to the Reubenites, the Gadites, the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, "Remember the word which Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, The Lord your God is providing you a place of rest, and will give you this land. Your wives, your little ones, your cattle shall remain in the land which Moses gave you beyond the Jordan. But all the men of valor among you shall pass over armed before your brethren." And so now we see stipulations of how the Passover is to take place. And so the people of Israel say this, but especially the people who are about to go forth into battle. "Just as we obeyed Moses in all things, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses." And so the people here say, "We pledge our fealty to you inasmuch as you pledge your fealty to God." And so they then say this, "Whoever rebels against your commandment and disobeys your words, whatever you command him shall be put to death. Only be strong and of good courage." Now, Joshua is wise. Not only has he journeyed with Moses, he has aided and led the people of Israel in battle. So this is a man who is wise in administration and warfare. And so he's clever. What does he do in chapter 2? "Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men secretly from the Shittim as spies, saying, 'Go view the land, especially Jericho.' And they went. They came into the house of a harlot whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. And it was told to the king of Jericho, 'Behold, certain men of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land.'" Now, at this point, the people in Canaan, I want to give you a bit of a historical context here. It's not like Canaan was one nation that Israel came and wiped out. In fact, if anything, we have historical texts that prove. So these are in the Amarna letters that were discovered in Egypt in the late 19th century. We have historical evidence to prove that Canaan was actually comprised of a series of state nations. All of these cities were individual nations that had local kings. Jericho was one of the strongest, most fortified on the outer skirts of Canaan. And so they had a great wall, because back then, the reality of your walls and gates signified the affluence and military might of a nation. Canaan, in this sense, was making a declaration to the world, "Do not trifle with us. Ours is not a nation to be messed with." And so Joshua was wise. He knew that taking them head on without first having intel would be foolish and detrimental to the Israelites. And so while the Lord is with him, he's still prudent. And so he sends forth spies into Jericho. And the king of Jericho obviously hears about this. Now, why are they afraid? Because by this point, Israel has gone to war with every nation from Egypt all the way till this area in Canaan. And everywhere they have fought, they have essentially won. By this point, Israel was proving itself to be a fearsome foe, one that would not be trifled with. And so, we know that after this information is gathered, Israel, and by the way, this is in non-biblical texts, historical texts, Israel, under the leadership of Joshua, issued a command to the nations in Canaan, to the state nations in Canaan. "We are coming in to take over the land because this is our rightful land." Jericho stayed to fight. They believed that they could take over Israel. They could defeat Israel. A few other nations joined the covenant under Israel. The rest of the Canaanite nations left, because they knew that they didn't have a claim to that land. Now, what do I mean by this? For us to understand this, we need to draw back all the way till Noah. Noah had 3 sons. These were Shem, Japheth, and Ham. Shem is the oldest, and so the covenant mediatorship was to go to him. He is the faithful son, and his descendants called upon the name of the Lord. Ham violated his father's bed. We don't know what that looks like, but we do know he uncovered his father's nakedness. We have theories as to what that might have meant based on Levitical law, but we do know, based on that he has a child named Canaan. And this child would go on to be a fearsome leader of nations of people who would take over the land given to Abraham. that they didn't have a right to, and they knew it. They took over the land as soon as the Israelites had left. This was when Jacob took his children, his children who made up the first 12 tribes of Israel. He took them away because of the famine, and the Canaanites moved in on that land during the time of slavery of the Israelites in Egypt. The Canaanites moved in on that land and occupied the land that was not theirs, and they knew it. In other words, they knew they were on borrowed time. It might have been hundreds of years, but squatter laws do not apply. Covenant laws do. And so the people of Israel were coming back to claim a promise that was rightly theirs. Theirs to own, theirs to have, theirs to live in. And so the other Canaanite nations knew our time has come, let's move out. And so they claimed other lands for their own, and they built their own nations there. A few of them, a small select few of them, joined Israel in covenant. And so they became subsumed into Israel. One nation, one state nation, Jericho, decided, nope, we're going to fight. They didn't have a right to, they didn't have a legal claim to, but they believed that they had the military might to. Now, that's the historical context we ought to know here. So these men go to the house of Rahab, and the king of Jericho sends forth soldiers, and this is what Rahab says. True, men came to me, but I did not know where they came from, and when the gate was to be closed at dark, the men went out. Where the men went, I do not know. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them. But what had happened was, she brought them up to the roof. She hid them with the stalks of flax, which she was drying on top of the roof. And so the soldiers pursued after them on the way to Jordan as far as the fords, but as soon as the pursuers were gone, the gate was shut. Before they lay down, Rahab came to them on the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given you the land, that the fear of you has fallen upon us, because she knows the reputation of Israel precedes them, that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. There's a recognition of the lordship of God here. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites that were utterly destroyed, and beyond the Jordan to Sihon and to Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we overheard, our hearts melted. There's no courage left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, who is God in heaven above and on the earth beneath, now then swear to me by the Lord, that as I have dealt kindly with you, you also will deal kindly with my father's house, and give me a sure sign, and save alive my father and my mother, my brothers and my sisters. So this is a woman who has some recognition of a natural law and a recognition of the sovereignty of God, despite the fact that she is really a prostitute. This is what she does for a living. This is a woman who recognizes might when she sees it. And so she's pledging fealty to God here and claiming a covenant protection over her entire household and all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death. And the men said to her, this is a covenant formula, covenant oath that's going to be invoked here. Our life for yours. If you do not tell this business of ours, we will deal kindly and faithfully with you when the Lord gives us the land. And then she let them down a rope through the window, for her house was built into the city wall, so that she dwelt in the wall. Now, this was not just happenstance. I believe this was divine providence. And so what did she do? She said to them, go into the hills, lest the pursuers meet you, hide yourselves 3 days. And again, this is an allusion here. We're looking for Christ in the narrative, and this is an allusion here of the 3 days that Christ will spend in the tomb. In the wilderness, they will hide for 3 days. It will be as if they have encountered a kind of death, and their resurrection will mean the liberation of the people of Israel and the defeat of the evil of Jericho. But I also want to point out, Rahab will show up in the future, long in the future, in Matthew's genealogy. Rahab's name will show up as one of the ancestors of Jesus Christ. I've just established to you, what does she do for a living? She's a harlot, a prostitute. And yet this pagan woman, this Canaanite woman, makes it into the quote-unquote Hall of Fame of the ancestors of the Messiah. Because God writes straight even through crooked lines. And God utilizes anyone who turns to him in faithfulness, regardless of what they've done, for the sake of his glory. The men said to her, we will be guiltless with respect to this oath of yours, which you have made us swear. Behold, when we come into the land, you shall bind this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down. and you shall gather into your house your father and your mother, your brother, and everyone. And if anyone goes out of the doors of your house into the streets, his blood shall be upon his head. But we shall be guiltless. But if a hand is laid upon any who is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head. Does that sound familiar? A red cord that, in this case, the red, scarlet, is bound to a window so that the wrath of Israel will pass over, and anyone who dwells in that household will be spared. Everyone who steps out of that household will perish. Israel recognizes that this is a continuation of the Passover, and so what is being done for Rahab and her family is an extension of the Passover blessing that God had given Israel. And that's how we ought to read this and understand that this is what the Passover does for us. Christ's Passover spares us from the dangers even of the world in temporal life, but ultimately of the dangers of eternal death. They departed, went into the hills, remained there 3 days, and then they came back. They told Joshua, "Truly the Lord has given all the land into our hands, and moreover all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of us," because there's a recognition here of the power of the Lord. So early in the morning, Joshua rose, set out from Shittim, and at the end of 3 days, the officers went through the camp, and now they're being led by what? The Ark of the Covenant. Because the Ark of the Lord is being carried by the Levitical priests. Now, there's a way to understand this. In some sense, we can see this as a kind of military chaplaincy, that the presence of the Lord goes with his children in battle. But I also want to stretch out here. Israel saw battle as an extension of liturgical warfare. As the Lord leads the battle, the people of Israel fight the war. If the Lord doesn't go forth, the people of Israel will not fight the war. Anytime they attempted to do so, they wound up in ruin. Now, more instructions are given to them, but the Lord said to Joshua, look, more affirmation. "This day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all of Israel, that they may know you, and they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. You shall command the priests who bear the Ark of the Covenant. When you come to the brink of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan." And Joshua said to the sons of Israel, "Come here, and hear the words of the Lord your God." And Joshua said, "Hereby you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you." And then listen to the names of the nations. This tells you that in the land of Canaan, there were more than one nation of people. The Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Jebusites, all of these nations were dwelling in that land. But it is the ark that is to pass over, again, the language of Passover, to pass over before you into the Jordan. And so, listen to this. "When the soles of the feet of the priests who bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan shall be stopped from flowing, and the waters coming down from above shall stand in one heap." And so when the people set out from their tents to pass over the Jordan, that's exactly what happened. It's cutting a long story short here. So what do we see? We see that what God worked with Moses, he does with Joshua. Because instead of the parting of the Red Sea, we have the parting of the Jordan River. And this, again, as I mentioned in an earlier episode, entry into waters to rise up again is a symbol of baptism. And so the people of Israel are entering into a kind of new baptism, and they arise from it, from death to life. And their life now will be a battle that they will win because the Lord leads the charge. And so what do? As soon as they pass through the Jordan, they set up 12 stones as altars, because any warfare must be led with the worship of the one true God. That worship of God stops Israel from thinking of themselves, and it leads Israel to remember that it is the Lord who leads them. And so you and I have to pray as we engage in warfare of whatever sort, as we engage in the battles of the world, that the Lord leads the charge. Give our daily life to him. Trust him to not only protect, but also provide, to take care of and to lead the charge. And as the book of Exodus tells us, that we need not fight, we need only be still, because the battle is won in the name of the Lord. And so 12 stones are set up. The men of Israel did as Joshua commanded. The entirety of chapter 4 has to do with this. Command the priests who bear the ark, come up out of the Jordan, and as soon as they all stepped out, the waters overflowed its banks as before. And the sons of Israel on the other side of the Jordan, the far side of the Jordan, what did they do? Chapter 5, they get circumcised. Now you might ask, why weren't they circumcised before? Some of them were, some of them weren't. And this was Joshua inducting everyone who was uncircumcised formally into the covenant, so that an entire nation is now cut and set apart for God before warfare. They've entered baptizo, purification. They've entered into baptism. And so what circumcision did for the old covenant, the waters of baptism do for the new covenant. That it is the circumcision of the heart that is set apart for God, so that all that we do now belongs to the Lord. And so the flint knives, by the way, I own a flint knife that Steve Ray gave me, and it puts into perspective the sheer amount of pain involved in the work of circumcision. But look at the language that God has used here. Though all the people who came out had been circumcised, the people that were born on the way in the wilderness after they had come out of Egypt had not been circumcised. The sons of Israel walked 40 years in the wilderness, till all the nation, the men of war that came forth out of Egypt, had perished, because they didn't listen to the voice of the Lord. When they were circumcising all of the nation, and they were done, they remained in their places in the camp until they were healed. And so what do? They don't just rush into war. They go through baptism, they worship the Lord, they consecrate themselves to God, and they wait. They wait for healing. They wait for readiness. They trust in the Lord. But remember, waiting on the Lord, according to the scriptures, is not a passive work. During waiting, they meditate on the law of the Lord, as God told Joshua to do day and night. They read the scriptures. They prayed. They worshiped. They offered sacrifice. And then the Lord said to Joshua, "This day I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you." And so the name of that place is called Gilgal. Now, Gilgal it's from the Hebrew word galal. It means to roll away. God literally rolled away your past. He rolled away the burden of the past. And so, as we see now, they celebrate the Passover at Gilgal. The sons of Israel were encamped. They kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month, that evening on the plains of Jericho, because this is a new Passover. The manna ceased the next day. God kept providing for them miraculously until they no longer needed it. They ate of the produce of the land. The sons of Israel had manna no more, but they ate of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. They waited a whole year. They crossed the Jordan, and they encamped next to Jericho, and they waited a whole year. Why? Because they were building ground. They were building resources. They were training. They were trading. They were getting ready. There's also kind of psychological warfare at play here. Jericho knew their time was coming to a close. And so a warning had been given to the kingdoms in Canaan. Leave. And in that year, many left. Jericho thought that their best bet would be to shore up their defenses. It would turn to no avail, but that whole 1 year was a year of preparation of Israel for conquest of the land. And so for those of us in our seasons of waiting, those of us in our seasons of wondering, 1 year, that year of waiting, is a time when God is preparing you for conquest, but He's also removing the obstacles of your conquest, because history tells us that if Israel had to combat every nation in the land of Canaan, it would have been a problem. It would have been difficult. God would have still given them victory, but it would have been difficult. But because it was only Jericho, God cleared away all the other nations. He inducted a few other nations into Israel by covenant, so that it was only Jericho they had to face. God is clearing away the obstacles from before you. You don't see it. You don't understand it, but God is clearing away the obstacles before you. Now look at this. Joshua gets a vision. God speaks to him. When Joshua was by Jericho, he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man stood before him with his drawn sword in hand. And Joshua went to him and said, "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" In other words, are you for us or against us? And he said, "No, but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come." And Joshua fell on his face on the earth and worshipped, and said to him, "What does my Lord bid his servant?" And the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, "Put off your shoes from your feet. The place you stand is holy." And Joshua did so. This is the final sign Joshua needed, that God sends forth his angels to fight his battles. That Israel, though they didn't see it, had adversaries that were invisible, but they had allies that were also invisible. And the allies outnumber our adversaries. And God is clearing away the path from before you. He is removing the evil, the problems, the issues. And He is going to clear that path forward so that you and I can enter into the promise and into the land that is owed us for His glory and for our providence as His children. And so, as we look at the story of Joshua, remember that this language, where you stand is holy, is a new Sinai event. As Moses was told those exact words when he encountered the Lord, Joshua is now told those exact words. In other words, God is doing a new Exodus. You will see that pattern again and again and again throughout Scripture. A recreation, a new Exodus. And you and I now live in a new Passover that is the Eucharist. We have a new Exodus in our pilgrim church journey on earth. But we also have, in this wondrous grace, like I mentioned, a new Passover, a new Exodus, and a constant new creation. Not just by the waters of baptism, but every time we return to our baptismal promises. And this is the Christological reality, that Joshua's conquest of the land is a material reality for us here and now. In the next episode, we will go through the story of the conquest even deeper and see how Christ comes out in the narrative. Thank you for joining us. I'm Marcus Peter.